Hello friends, welcome to my channel. We are studying capital. In the last video, we studied section 1 of chapter 1, capital volume 1. So that was the first video, that was the first part of the video. Now I am going to prepare the second part of the video. In the first part, we discussed about the commodity, its two factors, that is the use value and value. However, Karl Marx begin with a single commodity and from its very appearance, and the very appearance is the use value of the commodity, that is its physical and chemical properties and how it satisfies the human wants. And there are multifarious aspects of a commodity from the use value point of view. So this is where Karl Marx begins. Second, he analyzes about the exchange value aspect, and he also says that at a later stage in history, the use values becomes the material depositories of the exchange value. Then he picks the exchange value, that how exchange value looks like, what is exchange value, where do it stay. A contradiction, an apparent contradiction appears that exchange value, whether it resides within a commodity or outside a commodity, because it appears accidentally and relatively as soon as some another commodity comes before our commodity, of which we are trying to know that what is its exchange value. So this was an apparent contradiction from the appearance of exchange value that appears in the form of some another commodity. Karl Marx tries to find that from where the exchange, what is the genesis of exchange value, and so he calls exchange value as a mere phenomenal form or a mere appearance, and some essence is lying inside the commodity. On the basis of that, the exchange is taking place. So every commodity has certain commonness within itself, so that all the commodities are getting exchanged with themselves. How the exchange is taking place and why the exchange is taking place, Karl Marx tries to enumerate the concept of value, that every commodity contains value, and it is because of that value the commodities are getting exchanged with each other, however in different proportions. The value, it is always the value which is always exchanged equally, it is always equated equally, but because of their different appearances, because of their different use values, they are exchanged in different numbers. An example that we discussed in the last video was that one single bottle is getting exchanged with the two mangoes. So it is the difference between the number is only because of the different appearance and different use value. So however, in one bottle and the two mangoes, there is absolutely equal value. So unless the value is equated with each other, there cannot be no exchange. So value is always equated in full, but provided the proportion of the magnitude of the commodity must be correct. For example, one bottle, two mangoes. If we equate one bottle with one mango, the exchange will not take place. So these are some concepts that we discussed that day, and more concepts are upcoming in the upcoming paragraphs, and they require a lot of discussion. And as I told in the last video as well, that this is a mere interpretation of some text, and multiple interpretations can be given to the text. So I request all of you that please subscribe to the channel, and please, if you like the video, please like the video, share it to the maximum people. And if you have any comment or query or any question or any opinion that you have regarding any text or any explanation, then you must write it in the below comment section. And you can also share this video in various social media platforms. So without wasting time, we should begin our next part of the video, and let's begin. So let's begin with the next paragraph. In the last video, we end here, and now we have to begin with this paragraph. If then. So let's begin the paragraph. As use values, commodities are above all of different quantities. as use values, commodities are above all of different qualities, but as exchange value, they are merely different quantities and consequently do not contain an atom of use value. This line was discussed in the last video. However, I should discuss it again, that as use values, commodities are above all different qualities. If we are witnessing the commodities from the point of view of use value, then we look them towards as if they are of different qualities like different physical features, different chemical features, different uses. But if we see the same commodities from the point of view of exchange value, they are merely different quantities. Why they are merely different quantities? Because qualitatively they are alike, they are qualitatively same, they are qualitatively nothing but value, and consequently do not contain an atom of use value. From this aspect, from the exchange value aspect, point of view, the commodities are qualitatively alike, quantitatively different, and consequently do not contain an atom of use value. So in our analysis, we completely abstract from the use value. So if then we leave out of consideration the use value of commodities, they have only one common property left, that of being products of labor. But even the product of labor itself has undergone a change in our hands. If we make abstraction from its use value, we make abstraction at the same time from the material elements and the shapes that make the product a use value. We see in it no longer a table, a house, yarn, or any other useful thing. Its existence as a mere material thing is put out of sight. Neither can it any longer be regarded as a product of labor of joiner, mason, spinner, or any other different kind of productive labor. Along with the useful qualities of products themselves, we put out of sight both the useful character of the various kinds of labor embodied in them and the concrete forms of that labor. There is nothing left but what is common to them all. All are reduced to one and the same sort of labor, human labor in abstract. So, a very good paragraph. In this paragraph, in the last, let's begin it from the end. Human labor in abstract is found. Karl Marx has reduced, after abstracting everything out of the concept of use value, everything that was there, which was a kind of, we can say, which was kind of particularity in that use value. Every particularity has been abstracted, and now what has been left? A general thing is left. A general thing is left. But what does it mean? Why I'm calling it a general thing? Because it is contained by every commodity. Infinite number of commodities contains human labor in abstract. At least they must contain human labor in abstract. In what quantity? Maybe in different quantity. In what form? In what appearance? Maybe in the form of mason, maybe in the form of joiner, maybe in the form of some another thing. But at least every commodity contains same sort of labor in the generally, that is human labor in abstract. So let's take it again, that if we leave out of consideration the use value of commodities, they have only one common property left, that of being products of labor. So now we can merely say that they are at least the products of labor. But even the product of labor itself has undergone a change in our hands. What does it mean? It means that the product of labor, we know that everything is a product of labor, but when it is produced by different people with different skills, that with different know-how and in different times and different time and places, then the product of the labor generally becomes a product of a labor particularly. That is, it can appear in the form of chair, it can appear in the form of bottle, it can appear in the form of apple, etc., etc. So if we make abstraction from its use value, we make abstraction at the same time from the material elements and shapes that make the product a use value. So alongside, when we abstract use value, we also abstract from the material elements and shapes that make the product a use value. We see in it no longer a table, a house, a yarn, or any other useful thing. So now we do not look towards the commodity as if that it is a table, house, yarn, or anything. We merely look it as if that it is a product of labor. It is a product of labor. That's it. We discard, we separate every other aspect, and we take only this aspect. Its existence as a material thing is put out of sight. It is clear. Neither can it any longer be regarded as a product of labor of joiner or mason, or the mason or spinner, or any other definite kind of productive labor. So now we cannot call it that. When we have abstracted from its materiality, now we cannot call that it is a product of labor, or it is a product of joiner, or it is a product of mason, or it is a product of spinner, or of definite kind of labor. We will only say that it is a product of human being. It is a product of human being. Along with the useful qualities of the products themselves, we put out of sight both the useful character of various kinds of labors embodied in them. So alongside the qualities of the products, we put out of sight both the useful character of the various kinds of labor embodied in them. So when we keep aside the fact that it is a product of joiner, we also say at the very same time that the useful character of joiner, the useful character of mason that is embodied in the product is abstracted. And the concrete forms of that labor. What are the concrete forms of that labor? The concrete forms of that labor means which labor? Various kinds of labor. Concrete forms means various forms: table, chair, bottle, gold ring, etc., etc. All those things are abstracted now. And alongside concrete labor, alongside its useful materiality, every aspect is abstracted. There is nothing left. But what is common to them all are reduced to one and the same sort of labor, that is human labor in abstract. So this is human labor in abstract, which is contained in every commodity in various forms. So human labor, basically he is trying to say that human labor in abstract is congealed in all the commodities in different manners. It appears in the form of different manner. And human labor in abstract means that human labor in thought. It's a concept. Human labor is a concept. It is a concept. As soon as we calculate it, as soon as we try to see it, we try to find it, we always see it in the form of the product of the labor. We always see it in the concrete form. So abstract comes in the form of, abstract always appears in the form of concrete, and abstract is the reflection of the concrete. This is philosophy. Abstract is the reflection of the reality. What is reality? The reality is the chair, or the reality is the fact that the chair is produced by a human being. This is reality. And the reality is that a chair is made up of wood, and the wood is a material and objective thing outside us, and human being is applying labor over it. And if we try to analyze that what kind of labor is being analyzed, so we can say that labor is embodied is a human labor, but in the form of upholstery. When he's creating furniture, he's embodying. When he's creating clothes, then he's tailoring. He's doing tailoring, but ultimately he is embodying human labor in abstract in the form of tailoring. Okay, so let's coming to the next paragraph. Just a minute. We have seen that when commodities are exchanged, their exchange value manifests itself as something totally independent of their use value. But if we abstract from their use value, there remains their value as defined above. Therefore, the common substance that manifests itself in the exchange value of the commodities whenever they are exchanged is their value. The progress of our investigation will show that exchange value is only the form, is not only the form, is the only form. in which, however, it is only the form, is the only form in which the value of commodities can manifest itself or be expressed. For the present, however, we have to consider the nature of value independently of this its form. So coming back to it, I'm reading it again line by line. We have seen that when commodities are exchanged, their exchange value manifests itself as something totally independent of their use value. Why he is abstracting use value, and why he is explaining that the exchange value is manifesting something totally independent of their use value. What is the logic behind this line? I believe the logic is that in bourgeois political economy, it is considered that commodities are exchanged because of use value. So in that field, it is said that only because of use value, the commodity acquires exchange value. But Karl Marx is trying to because it is a critique of political economy, and Karl Marx is trying to criticize that use value aspect, that exchange is not taking place because of the use value. The exchange value actually manifests something totally independent of their use value. And what does it manifest? It manifests the value. And what is value? Value is human labor. And which human labor? Human labor in abstract. Let's next line. But if we abstract from their use value, there remains their value as defined above. So if we abstract in our analysis from their use value, we have nothing remains but only value as defined in this paragraph. So actually the use value, the exchange is not taking place because of use value, but the exchange is taking place because of value, and that appears in the form of use value and value. So this use value is created by the various forms of labors, that is concrete labor, and this exchange value derives is expressing the homogeneous human labor. So this concept will be discussed in the next section. Let's move ahead. Therefore, the common substance that manifests itself in the exchange value of commodities whenever they are exchanged is their value. Oh, it is quite clear. The progress of our investigation will show that exchange value is the only form in which value of commodities can manifest itself or to be expressed. So the progress will show that exchange value is the only form through which value appears. For the present, however, we have to consider the nature of value independently of its form. So now Karl Marx is saying that let's take what is value and independently from its form. Which form? Exchange value. Because exchange value is the form and value is the essence. So let's take it independently. So coming to the next paragraph. A use value, this one. A use value or a useful article, therefore, has value only because human labor in abstract has been embodied or materialized in it. How then is the magnitude of this value to be measured? Plainly, by the quantity of value creating substance, the labor contained in the article. The quantity of labor, however, is measured by its duration. Labor time, in its turn, finds its standard in weeks, days, and hours. So, what he's saying here, that a use value or a useful article, anything, therefore, has a value only because human labor in abstract has been embodied or materialized in it. So anything which is useful contains value only because human labor in abstract is embodied or materialized in it, obviously due to the labor. How then is the magnitude of this value, the value that is being carried by the useful article, how the magnitude of this value to be measured, how to calculate how much value it is carrying? Because only because of this magnitude of value we can decide for what amount we can sell it. So it is necessary. What is for we can to decide the price, it is necessary to find the magnitude of the value that is there in the any useful article, plainly by the quantity of value creating substance, the labor contained in the article. The quantity of labor, however, is measured by its duration, by the time, and the labor time in its turn finds its standards in the weeks, days, and hours. So the quantity of labor can only be calculated only through the duration and the labor time that is embodied while making the useful article. So it is calculated in the form of days, weeks, etc., etc. So certain questions that come to our mind while reading this paragraph is that how the labor time of all the commodities can be equated with each other, because uh, there can have different labor times of different commodities. Some commodities are skilled, some commodities are product of skilled labor, some commodities are product of unskilled labor. So uh, it seems that certain things are missing in this paragraph. A lot of things are missing in this paragraph and it requires a lot of discussion. So I believe that answers of those questions can be answered in upcoming paragraphs. Some people might think that if the value of a commodity is determined by the quantity of labor spent on it, the more idle and unskillful the labor, the more valuable would his commodity be, because the more time would be required in its production. The labor, however, that forms the substance of value is homogeneous human labor, expenditure of one uniform labor power, the total labor power of society, which is embodied in the sum total of the values of all commodities produced by that society, counts here as one homogeneous mass of human labor power, composed, composed though it be of innumerable individual units. Each of these units is the same as any other so far as it has the character of average labor power of society and takes effect as such, that is, so far as it requires for producing a commodity no more time than is needed on an average, no more than is socially necessary. The labor time socially necessary is that required to produce an article under the normal conditions of production and with the average degree of skill and intensity prevalent at the time. The introduction of power looms into England probably reduced by one half the labor required to weave a given quantity of yarn into cloth. The handloom weavers, as a matter of fact, continued to require the same time as before, but for all that, the product of 1 hour of their labor represented after the change only half an hour's social labor and consequently fell to one half of its former value. The paragraph is very long and it has number of concepts, new concepts. And as I discussed in the last paragraph, there are certain questions that are start appearing in the mind as soon as we say that the quantity of labor, that the quantity of value that is embodied in the commodities, how to find the magnitude of that labor, and we say that the labor time will decide. So this labor time is a very vague concept, and it requires number of other concepts to understand that what is labor time, how labor time is decided, that which labor time is correct, which is not, and there may be different labor times for different sorts of commodities. So let's see this paragraph, that what he is trying to say and how he puts his arguments. So first line, some people might think that if the value of a commodity is determined by the quantity of labor spent on it, the more idle and unskillful the labor, the more valuable would his commodity be, because the more time would be required in that production. So these three lines are quite intelligible, that Suppose someone will say that okay, if I will produce a commodity in 10 hours rather than in 1 hour, usually everybody can produce that commodity in 1 hour, but now I am sitting on the machine and I produce that commodity in 10 hours. So as I have spent 10 hours on that commodity, so my commodity must have more value, or 10x value, 10 times value than the commodity that is produced in the 1 hour. So Karl Marx is discarding this unscientific argument, and he is saying that a commodity which is usually being produced in 1 hour should always be produced in 1 hour. No extra time should be uh, embodied in this. Only the time that is required generally, that is required socially, that is required, only the time that is required on an average basis, that with the reasonable amount of uh, skill, with the reasonable amount of technology that is available there, to which he is called, to which he calls socially necessary labor time. That suppose an article usually requires 1 hour with average degree of skill, with average degree of with average degree of productivity of the labor, and everything is average in that circumstances, keeping all those circumstances in average, that the commodity should be produced in 1 hour. And now if someone is deliberately, or due to any, maybe deliberately or due to any contingency, is producing the same article in 2 hours, then the same article which is produced in 2 hours contains the same value as if that it was made in 1 hour. So despite the second hour, the second hour of labor becomes superfluous. All right, let's move in the next line. The labor, however, that forms the substance of value is homogeneous human labor, expenditure of one uniform labor power. This is very important line, and in this line he has used the term substance of value. This phrase is there in the title of the section. Let's go to the title of the section. Just 1 minute. So here is the title of the section. The two factors of commodity: use value and value. The substance of value. What is the substance of value? So what is the substance of value? The substance of value is homogeneous human labor. He has answered that question here. So this is the methodology of Karl Marx, that he raises questions first, and in his text we find that answers in the upcoming paragraphs. The labor, however, that forms the substance of value is homogeneous human labor, expenditure of one uniform labor power. What is this? So the labor that forms the labor which that forms the substance of value is homogeneous human labor. So the substance of value is nothing but the homogeneous human labor. And what is homogeneous human labor? How it comes into being? It comes into being because of the expenditure of one uniform labor power. What is this one uniform labor power? What is, first of all, what is labor power? The labor power means capacity of a human being to do labor. The capacity of a human being to embody his mental and physical capacities in the form, and to do labor and to produce something, to give a service to someone. So the labor power is the capacity. So, and why he's saying one uniform? Because every human being is at least have mental and physical capacities. They may vary accordingly, but at least we can say that every human being generally has mental and physical capacities to do labor. So this capacity is uniform in every human being. From this aspect, it is uniform. So let's read it again. The labor, however, that forms the substance of value is homogeneous human labor expenditure of one uniform labor power. So it is because of the expenditure of one uniform labor power. It is because of the expenditure of uniform labor power, homogeneous human labor is created, and which is actually the substance of value, and it is embodied in the use values. Use values come into being only when the expenditure of human labor power is done. Next line, the total labor power of society, which is embodied in the sum total of values of all the commodities produced by that society, counts here as one homogeneous mass of human labor power. So he is explaining what I explained in the previous line. The total labor power of society. What does it mean? The total, that it means that every human being, for example, on our earth, there are around 7 billion people. So their overall capacity, total capacity to do labor, the total labor power of society, which is embodied in the sum total of the values of all the commodities. So the total capacity, where it is embodied, where it gets embodied, it gets embodied in the sum total of all the values of all the commodities. In all the commodities, that capacity is getting embodied, and every commodity is getting produced because of the labor power carried by the society in general, which is embodied in the sum total of all the values of all the commodities produced by that society, counts here as one homogeneous mass of human labor power. So he is stating that all the commodities are nothing but one homogeneous mass of human labor power. All the value, total value is nothing, is equivalent. Total value, he is basically visualizing all the commodities into a one single commodity, and that all the human labor power into a single human being. For example, there is a single human being, because he has taken the most general aspect is that every human being can do labor, and on that basis he has created this concept that the total labor power of society, which is embodied in sum total of all the values of commodities produced by the society, counts here as one homogeneous mass of human labor power. The total labor power is nothing but one homogeneous mass of human labor power, composed though it be of innumerable individual units. So innumerable individual units are there. There are innumerable individual units in the form of human beings, and there are innumerable individual units in the form of commodities. The total human labor power is getting embodied in the form of value in all the commodities, in all the commodities of various sorts, in different proportions. In tailoring, it is going in different proportion. In teaching, it is going in different proportion. So basically, so this is the reason that various sorts of commodities of infinite number are appearing. But what is appearing? It is the homogeneous human labor that is appearing, and homogeneous human labor is homogeneous only because it is the product of the one uniform labor power. And why it is why it is uniform? Because after all, everybody is a human being. Moving ahead, each of these units is the same as any other so far it has the character of average labor power of society and takes effect as such. That is, so far as it requires for producing a commodity no more time than is needed on an average, no more than is socially necessary. He's talking about the concept of the socially necessary labor time. Where it is, each of these units is the same as any other. So if we see from this point of view, every commodity is absolutely same to the another commodity because it contains a portion of homogeneous human labor power. So some commodity may contain less homogeneous human labor power, some commodity may contain more homogeneous human labor power. So not human labor power, homogeneous human labor. Homogeneous human labor is the product of labor power, which is possessed by all human beings. So these concepts should not be confused with each other. Human labor power is the capacity to do labor, and homogeneous human labor is the product. Each of these units is the same as any other so far as it has the character of average labor power of society. So if we see from this aspect, every unit is alike, have same character so far as we look towards these units, that as if they have the character, as if that it has the character of average labor power of society and takes effect as such. That is, so far as it requires for producing a commodity no more time than is needed on an average, no more than is socially necessary. And at the very same time it contains, I'm trying to explain it, at the very same time that every unit is a product of average labor power of society, and that average labor power of society is embodied in the product in that unit in no more time that is needed on average, no more than is socially necessary. So that labor power of society should be embodied in the socially necessary labor time. It should be embodied always in the form of socially necessary labor time. This concept I explained here, that socially necessary labor time is that labor time, that embodiment of the human labor power which is reasonably correct, which is reasonably required. The labor time socially necessary is that required to produce an article under the normal conditions. Just 1 minute. All right. The labor time socially necessary is that required to produce an article under the normal conditions of the production and with average degree of skill and intensity prevalent at that time. So labor time socially necessary labor time is nothing but the time that is required, the labor time that is required to produce an article under the normal conditions of production. For example, what are the normal conditions? Average conditions, not extreme or not neither extreme. They must be normally existing and with average degree of skill. Average degree of skill of whom? Average degree of skill of labor. And the intensity prevalent at that time, that average intensity of the labor, that how much intensity of the labor is embodied in the commodity. So he is talking about the average circumstances, that how much average time is required to produce an article. Let's go back to the that example, that suppose a bottle is produced in 1 hour usually on an average, but if somebody deliberately produces, or due to some contingency produces that bottle in 10 hours, then then we can say that the socially necessary labor time of the bottle is 1 hour, and the 9 hours that are unnecessarily embodied on that bottle are superfluous, and they will not create any value within the bottle, and the 10 hours contains as much value as if that it was created in 1 hour. So if a bottle is created in 10 hours rather than 1 hour, then a lot of raw material, lot of labor time, lot of wages has been wasted, and the product will be sold at losses. Suppose the bottle is produced in half time, then the socially necessary labor time that is required to produce the bottle, and which is 1 hour, and suppose it is produced due to some change, due to some immediate change. for example, somebody purchased a new technology, new machinery from China, and nobody in the city has that technology. Now the same bottle now the same bottle he produced in half an hour, but overall, on an average, everybody, almost all the bottle producers still produce that bottle in 1 hour. But the person who purchased that special technology from China is producing the bottle in half an hour. So now he is producing the bottle in half an hour, which is which is half an hour less than the socially necessary labor time of the bottle, and he will get extra profit out of it. He will sell the bottle at dearer margin. So this is the concept of socially necessary labor time, which is an average time that is required to produce the article. The introduction of power looms in England probably reduced by one half the labor required to weave a given quantity of yarn into cloth. The handloom weavers, as a matter of fact, continued to require same time as before, but for all that, the product of 1 hour of their labor represented after the change only half an hour of the social labor, and consequently fell to one half of their former value. So it is just the example that I given on the basis of that bottle example. He is giving an example of yarn example here, that earlier it was produced by weavers, handloom, and now suppose handloom has the produce that was produced by handloom, and it is stored in the warehouse, and now power looms has been introduced into the England, and labor time producing the same cloth has been reduced to half because of the improved technology. So the product of the handloom, the product of the handloom, which is produced in more time, which contains more labor time than the labor time that is being embodied by the power looms. So their value reduces to half. Their value reduces to half because now labor time generally or socially required to produce the given quantity of yarn is half an hour, is reduced to half, and the earlier product that was stored in the warehouse or inventory, or the product now of the this handloom, becomes obsolete, becomes costlier, and in this manner the power looms ultimately replace the handlooms, because power looms can create a product, the same product in less time, and less labor time is embodied in the new product, and it changes the standards of the socially necessary labor time. So the product, the quantity of the product also increases, because now in 1 hour, because of the improved technology, for example, in 1 hour can two clothes can be produced, while when it was manufactured by handloom, only one cloth was produced. So the quantity also increases, and the value per unit quantity decreases. So these are various concepts that are about to come in the next paragraphs, but till now the important thing that is to be required, that the socially necessary labor time keeps on changing. It is a continuously changing concept, because all these things are continuously changing. That as the average conditions keeps on changing, the average degree of skill of the labor keeps on changing, and the technology keeps on changing, the circumstances keeps on changing. So the standard of the labor time that is required to produce an item which is socially necessary labor time, also this standard also keeps on changing all the time. So that's it. Coming to the next paragraph, we see then that we see then that we see then that which determines the magnitude of value. The magnitude of value of any article is the amount of labor socially necessary or the labor time socially necessary for its production. This term magnitude of value was given here. This one, the magnitude of value. So let's find what he is trying to say. What is the magnitude of value? Oh, sorry, some mistake has taken place. Okay. We see then that which determines the magnitude of value of any article is the amount of labor socially necessary or the labor time socially necessary for its production. So the magnitude of value is determined because of the labor time socially necessary for its production. Okay, let me complete it first, then I will try to explain it. Each individual commodity in this connection is to be considered as an average sample of its class. This word is important, class. Commodities, therefore, in which equal quantities of labor are embodied or which can be produced in the same time have same value. The value of one commodity is to the value of any other as the labor time necessary for the production of one is to that necessary for the production of the other. As values, all commodities are only definite masses of congealed labor time. Okay, let's see it closely, what he's trying to say. We see then that which determines the magnitude of value of any article is the amount of labor socially necessary. So the magnitude of value of any article is determined by labor socially necessary or the labor time socially necessary for its production. Magnitude of value is dependent upon the socially necessary labor time. Each individual commodity in this connection is to be considered as an average sample of its class. What does it mean? What does these two lines mean actually? He is stating that every commodity is produced, that it means that value resides in a commodity only because of the labor time, socially necessary labor time is embodied in the commodity, and how much socially necessary labor time is carried by a commodity decides the magnitude of the value of that commodity. First line is clear. Each individual commodity in this connection is to be considered as an average sample of its class. So basically, every commodity, every single unit is the average sample of its class. It means that there are various classes of commodities in the market. There are infinite number of classes of commodities in the market, and they must be carrying different standards of socially necessary labor time. For example, if we take an example of gold ring, for example, a gold chain or ring, a gold chain can be produced in one day, for example, in one day. And the socially necessary labor time for producing a gold chain is one day. And similarly, the socially necessary labor time of producing a plastic bottle is, on the other hand, 1 hour or 10 minutes. So this is how, suppose in a whole day, 100 bottles are produced. Suppose in a whole day, 100 bottles are produced. And on the other hand, one gold ring is produced. So if we compare the labor time
and both are produced in their respective socially necessary labor time. Suppose we can suppose it that the gold chain was produced in its socially necessary labor time, which is 1 day, and at the very same time 100 bottles were produced in their respective socially necessary labor time, that is 1 day. So we can compare, we can exchange one gold ring, one gold chain with 100 bottles, so actually what we are exchanging with each other, what we are actually comparing with each other, we are actually comparing the labor time which is socially necessary labor, which is socially the labor time which socially necessary, that is embodied in one single commodity, that is gold ring, and when it is expanded in some another sort of commodity, for example a plastic bottle, then hundreds of bottle appear. This in those 100 bottles, the same value, the same labor time appears, which was there in the single commodity, that is gold. So now another question may come into the mind, that why in the whole day only one single commodity of gold is produced and 100 bottles are produced? Because of their different socially necessary labor time standards. Because in gold, more in producing a gold ring, more labor time, more acute precision is required, more trained labor is required. Its average socially necessary labor time is different. It is a highly skilled work, while producing a plastic bottle can be of less labor, can be of less precision, can require its socially necessary labor time of one bottle is very less as compared to the one single ring, because of its average socially necessary labor time different conditions, because of its different conditions. Another question that may come into the mind, that why gold is costlier and plastic is cheaper? This question can also come, that one can also say that it is because the gold is costly and the plastic is cheaper, therefore the gold ring is costly and gold ring is equated with 100 bottles. This is the reason that gold is very costly and the plastic is very cheaper. So here also the concept of the logic of socially necessary labor time applies perfectly, that while extracting the gold from the gold mines, it requires a huge amount of socially necessary labor time. Again, the socially necessary labor time to extract the gold from the gold mines is very high, while the socially necessary labor time in producing the plastic is very low. So this makes gold costlier and plastic cheaper. Gold as a raw material, it is also a commodity. As a raw material, it is also a commodity. As a ring or a gold chain, it is also a commodity. Basically, what is actually being equated, what is actually being compared is nothing but the labor, whether it was embodied during the formation, during the production of the raw material stage, or it was embodied at the later stage, for example the chain making or ring making, etc., or the plastic bottle making. So the gold is costlier because more labor is embodied in it. Why more labor is embodied in gold? Because in extracting gold from the gold mines, its average standards of extracting gold out of the gold mine is high. Socially necessary labor time required to produce gold is higher than the socially necessary labor time required to produce the same quantity of the plastic. For example, 1 kg gold has a value of 50, has a value of not 1 kg is very costly. 10 grams of gold has a value of 50,000 rupees, because so much labor time has been embodied in it. And in 50,000 rupees we can purchase a truck full of plastic bottles. So this is why very less amount of labor, very less amount of labor time, very less amount of value is embodied in a single quantity, single unit of plastic bottle, and very high quantity of homogeneous human labor is embodied in a gold chain or the commodity, the raw material gold itself. So there are various classes of commodities in the market, and this is a very profound concept. And I gave an example of gold chain, and so, we must also know that why a simple gold chain is less expensive, while a beautifully designed gold chain is costly, because the logic is same, that more labor time is embodied in the while creating the beautiful design of the gold chain. So within the class there can be subclasses. However, it is not written here, but logically we can deduce this, that in a every commodity is an average sample, but within the that class there can be infinite number of subclasses. So another, we can take another daily life example. For example, a very common example, for example, can a rickshaw puller can purchase a gold ring? Yes, he can, but with how much amount of labor, or how much amount of money, how much amount of labor time? Because a gold ring, for example, of 10 grams is of 50,000 rupees. Suppose it is of 50,000 rupees, and a rickshaw puller uh, earns, his income is 500 rupees per day. So he has to do labor for 100 days to make to purchase a gold chain. He has to do for 100 days, because 100 multiplied by 500 is equal to 50,000. So continuous work for 100 days can purchase him a gold chain. So a gold chain, the time embodied, the labor time socially necessary to produce a gold chain uh, embodied in the gold chain can only be equated with the labor that is done by a rickshaw puller in 100 days, and only then he can purchase a gold. He can purchase a gold chain. So the accusation on the Karl Marx is that Karl Marx makes everybody equal. No, he perfectly distinguishes between the various forms of skilled and unskilled labor. Producing gold and producing gold chain is a skilled labor, and producing and pulling a rickshaw or doing manual labor is a unskilled labor. However, the unskilled labor and the skilled labor are generally nothing but the expenditure of human labor power, and the skilled labor can be reduced into unskilled labor. For example, 10 minutes of doctor, for example, fees of a doctor is 500 rupees for 10 minutes consultation charges. A rickshaw puller who is doing 8 hours job, and he's producing 500 rupees, so with those 500 rupees he can purchase the 10 minutes of a doctor. So uh, in an opposite way, we can also say that the 10 minutes of doctor is nothing but 8 hours of rickshaw puller. So every skilled labor can be ultimately reduced to unskilled labor. And so for the simplification, for the sake of simplification, we can always say that every skilled labor is nothing but the multiplied form of the unskilled labor. So these concepts are about to come in the next upcoming paragraphs, but they are very important to understand these lines. The value of one commodity is to the value of any other, as the labor time necessary for the production of one is to that of necessary of the production of other. So unless the labor time is properly equated with each other, the exchange do not takes place. Whether the quantity is to be adjusted accordingly, and so one gold chain can be easily equated with the another gold chain, because every sort of labor, every labor time labor time in the gold chains is equal. So it is basically not an exchange, because a commodity exchange with the same commodity is not an exchange. A is equal to A is nothing, right? as values, all commodities are only definite masses of congealed labor time. So lastly, if we see them as values, all commodities are only definite masses of congealed labor time. So this concept has been explained in a, I think that in a proper manner, and I try to do justice with the concept. Rest depends on you, that how you critically analyze this concept. Coming to the next paragraph, the value of a commodity would therefore remain constant if the amount of labor time required for its production also remained constant, but the later changes with every variation in the productiveness of labor. This productiveness is determined by various circumstances, amongst others, by average amount of skill of workmen, the state of science, and the degree of its practical application, the social organization of production, the extent and the capabilities of the means of production, and the physical conditions. So I think that we should stop here first, then we will move ahead. The value of a commodity, I'm reading it again line by line. The value of a commodity would therefore remain constant. How it remains constant? If the labor time required for its production remained constant. So the labor time required for producing a commodity, if it is constant for a certain time, for example, for a certain season, then the value of that commodity would remain constant. So it depends upon the labor time that is required. Required means socially required. Required means socially required, socially necessary labor time. But the later changes, that is the socially necessary labor time, changes with every variation in the productiveness of labor. So with every variation in the productiveness of labor, what is productiveness of labor? Productiveness of labor means, suppose earlier, due to low quality of technology, the labor could produce only one coat in 1 hour. But now with high technology and with double productiveness of labor, now with high technology, he can produce 2 coats per hour. So in every coat, now earlier in 1 hour, only one coat was produced. So the value of one coat was higher. Now due to the increased productiveness of labor due to new technology, 2 coats are produced in 1 hour. So the value contained in earlier in one coat now shifts into the 2 coats. That is now in the improved conditions, 2 coats have the single coat, the new coat out of these 2 coats contains half the value that was contained earlier in the one coat when it was produced in 1 hour. As we know that now in 1 hour 2 coats are produced, so each of these 2 coats contains lesser value than the earlier coat. However, the positive side is that now due to the increased productiveness of the labor, now society has got 2 coats. The wealth of the society has been increased, and as we know that wealth of the society resides in the use value, and now 2 people can be clothed, 2 people can be saved from cold. With the improved productiveness of the labor, with the improved technology, 2 coats can be produced now, and 2 people can be saved from cold, and overall the society becomes wealthy with the increase in the productiveness of the labor, increase in the technology. And let's move. This productiveness is determined by various circumstances, amongst others by the average amount of skill. So he is trying to define the socially necessary labor time, how socially necessary labor time changes. This productiveness is determined by various circumstances. How the productiveness changes, it depends on various circumstances, among others by the average amount of skill of the workman, the state of science. What is the science till now? The degree of the practical application, it is also important. Suppose there is the state of science is very high, but the degree of application is very poor. Today we have discovered the quantum computers, but quantum computers has not become reality. 3D printing has been 3D printing technology has been evolved, has been discovered, but 3D print that but the rate of the degree of its practical application is very low. It is nowhere practically applicable. Similarly, e-vehicles are not properly they have not become a proper reality. They have not been practically applied. The social organization of production. What is the social organization? Whether the production is being done in a family mode of production, a slavery mode of production, a feudal mode of production, or artisanship mode of production, capitalist mode of production, or this post-capitalism or electronics, etc., etc. However, he is not aware of that, but still we can put it that also into it. The social organization of production, the extent and the capabilities of the means of production. What is the extent and what is the capabilities of means of production? How much they are developed by physical conditions, for example, uh, rain and geographical conditions, etc., etc. Human labor power, how strong it is, how weak it is, a lot of genetical factors, infinite factors. These are infinite factors. Some of them are defined here. The list is not exhaustive, and infinite factors affect the productivity of labor, and it affect the socially necessary labor time required to produce a certain item, and every certain item has a certain item, and infinite number of commodities are divided into infinite number of classes of commodities because of their various forms, various shapes, and they have their own respective socially necessary labor time. Moving ahead, for example, the same amount of labor in favorable season is embodied in 8 bushels of corn, and in unfavorable only 4. So if there is a favorable season, that is physical conditions is favorable, the same amount of labor can be embodied in 8 bushels of corn. More production, 8 bushel of corn, 8 bushel of corn contain same labor. In unfavorable conditions, only 4 bushels are produced. So the 4 contains same value as according as the 8 bushels. 8 bushels cheaper than 4 bushels. Why cheaper? The unit of this is cheaper than this because now the value is divided into 8 because of the unfavorable, because of the favorable season, because we ultimately the labor time matters. In favorable season, the same labor time is embodied into 8 bushels. In unfavorable season, the same labor time is embodied in 4. So these 4, the unit of these 4, that is 1, contains more value, double value, than a single unit of these 8 bushels of corn, and it contains half value of this. The same labor extracts from rich mines more metal than from poorer mines. So basically, ultimately, what he is trying to say that it is the amount of labor that matters. The same labor extract from rich mines, because in rich mines more metal is produced. Why more metal is produced? Because it is easier to extract same amount of it is easier to extract more amount of metal from rich mines, and if it is easier to extract the metal from rich mines, then it is quite obvious that less labor is embodied in extracting the metal. And in poor mines, more effort is to be put by labor to extract the same quantity of metal. So less quantity of mines, less quantity of metal is produced, but it contains more value, so it becomes costlier. Diamonds are very rare occurrence on the earth's surface, hence their discovery costs on an average a great deal of labor time. So the same example, that diamonds are very rare. It requires a lot of effort, lot of labor time to find the diamonds. Therefore, diamonds are costlier. Suppose just like the pebbles, diamonds would have been available on our streets while walking. Would the diamond would be so much costly? क्या हीरा सदा के लिए रहता? Would the various jewel companies would have sold this? No, it would have been found on the streets and children would be playing with it. This, what we say, they would have played with it, that kancha goli. All right. Consequently, much labor is represented in a small compass. So which small compass? Diamond is a small compass. It measures a lot of labor. Jacob doubts whether gold has ever been paid for at its full value. This applies still more to diamonds. According to Ischivig, I can't pronounce this. Ischivig, the total produce of Brazilian diamond mines for the 80 years ending in 1823 had not realized the price of 1.5 years average produce of sugar and coffee plantation of the same country. Although the diamond cost much more labor, therefore represented more value. With richer mines, the same quantity of labor would embody itself in more diamonds and their value would fall. 1 minute. In this example, he is giving about that how this example, rich mines, diamond mine, Brazilian diamond mines example, he is trying to say that labor was so severely unpaid, and they, in 80 years of mining, they were merely paid amount as an amount of merely 1.5 years of average produce of sugar and coffee plantation of the same country, equal to the same country. So as much value that is embodied in the sugar and coffee plantation of 1.5 years of average produce of sugar and coffee was given for to the 80 years of mining of diamond. Basically, he is trying to say that despite that the diamond contains too much value, but the laborers who were producing, who were giving their labor time to extract the labor, were so severely less paid. That's it. This much I can understand out of it. Rest is the history. I am not as, I do not know what is the historical background of this concept, of this fact, but this much I can understand out of it. With richer mines, the same quantity of labor would embody itself in more diamonds, their value would fall. This concept is already discussed. If we could succeed a small expenditure of labor in converting carbon into diamonds, their value might fall below that of bricks. So if we develop a technology of converting carbon into diamond, then its value would fall below the value of bricks. Their value will fall drastically. In general, the greater the productiveness of labor, the less is the labor time required for the production of an in general, the greater the productiveness of labor, the less is the labor time required for the production of an article. So if the productiveness of labor is high, then less amount of labor is required for production of an article. Of a single article, less amount of labor time is embodied, because the labor of the productiveness of the labor is high. It can produce more number of articles in a given amount of time. In 1 hour, it can produce 2 coats rather than 1. So less amount of labor time is required to produce an article, yani ki an coat, a coat, a single unit. The less is the amount of labor crystallized in that article, the less is its value, and vice versa. So if the less is the amount of labor crystallized in that article, It means that the less is the amount of time, the labor time crystallized in that article, the less is the value. So in 1 hour, if 2 coats are produced rather than 1, then less amount of labor is crystallized in that coat because of the improved technology, because of the improved productiveness of labor. And now the new coat, after the change of the circumstances, change of the socially necessary labor time, the less value is it contains lesser value than the earlier standards, and vice versa. If due to any circumstances, suppose due to the change of the physical conditions, oh, some mistake happened. Just 1 minute. All right. So this is quite clear. The less is the productiveness of labor, the greater is the amount of labor time required for the production of an article, and the greater is its value. Suppose due to poor season, the productiveness of the labor falls. The great labor time is being embodied in producing the bushels. Rather than 8 bushels, now 4 bushels of corn are produced. So more labor time is embodied, more labor time is required for the production of a single bushel, and the greater is the value. It becomes costlier. The value of the commodity therefore varies directly as the quantity and inversely as the productiveness of the labor incorporated in the it. So he is giving mathematically that the value of a commodity has a direct relation, is directly proportional to the quantity of the item produced, and it is inversely proportional to the productiveness of the labor incorporated in that item. So it is the law, it is the objective law which is defined in the paragraph. So coming to the last paragraph of the section, I think that in the last paragraph he is summarizing some ancillary concepts and some miscellaneous concepts that naturally come, that some questions that naturally come to the mind. Those questions are dealt in this paragraph. Let's read it. A thing can be a use value without having value. We discussed this aspect on the first page. A thing can be a use value without having value. This is the case whenever its utility to a man is not due to labor. Such are air, virgin soil, natural meadows, etc. A thing can be useful and the product of human labor without being a commodity. However, whoever directly satisfies his wants with the produce of his own labor creates indeed use values, but not commodities. In order to produce the latter, we must not only produce use values, but use values for others, social use values. This term is important, social use values. And not only for others, it is in bracket. And not only for others, without more, the medieval peasant produced a quit rent corn for his feudal lord and tithe corn for his parson, but neither the quit rent corn nor the tithe corn became commodities by the reason of the fact that they had been produced for others to become, they had, despite that they had been produced for others, but still they do not become commodities. He is saying this. To become a commodity, a product must be transferred to another whom it will serve as use value by means of exchange. By means of exchange, it is important. Lastly, nothing can have value without being an object of utility. If the thing is useless, so is the labor contained in it, and the labor does not count as labor, therefore creates no value. The paragraph contains very profound information, and it is related, this paragraph is related with the 4th section of chapter 1. So he has briefly introduced some concepts of section 4 in this paragraph that we will discuss in upcoming videos, but I'll try to explain it line by line as much as I can understand at this stage. A thing can be a use value how a thing can be a use value without having value. This is the case whenever its utility to a man is not due to labor, such as air, virgin soil, natural meadows, etc. It contains use value, but it do not contains value because it do not contains labor. They are not produced because of labor. But suppose that this air, it is stored in the form of oxygen and supplied to hospitals, then it becomes a commodity. It has a use value and it acquires an exchange value, and it contains amount of labor. Which labor? The labor that was required to enclose this air into a gas cylinder. So this is how a thing becomes a commodity when labor gets embodied in it. A thing can be useful and the product of human labor without being a commodity. Correct? Up to this point, I think that it is quite understandable. Whoever directly satisfies his wants with the produce of his own labor creates indeed use values, but not commodities. This line is very important. Someone who is producing for his own self. For example, in a family, we cook for ourselves, we produce food for ourselves and satisfies our own wants with the product of our own labor. We produce food for self consumption, so we are producing use values but not commodities. We are not creating exchange values. It do not contain value. This is a mere use value. We are producing the content for self consumption. So here also one answer comes. A question that was raised on the first page was that at a later stage the use values becomes the material depositories of exchange value. So when the society was of such kind, when they were producing for self consumption and not for sale and not for the purpose of consumption of somebody else, they were merely use values, and they becomes material depositories of exchange values, or rather commodities, when the articles, the things were produced not for the purpose of self consumption, for self want, but for the consumption of someone else, for the purpose of sale. Then exchange value, commodities value, all these concepts come into being. In order to produce the later, that is commodities. In order to produce the commodities, he must not only produce use values, but use values for others, social use values. So now in order that the thing becomes commodity, in order to produce the commodity, he must not only produce use value, he must not produce use value, he must not produce a he must not only produce a use value. Suppose he's producing a water bottle, and now the water bottle should be useful for others as well. He is producing for the purpose that it should be useful for all, not for me, but it is a use value not only for me, but it is a use value for the whole society, for the social use values. but use values for others and social use values. So this social use value is very quite confusing term, because a natural question that comes into mind, that suppose I have produced a bottle and the bottle is a use value, then it should be a use value for other as well. However, I have produced the bottle for my self consumption, but it has a capacity to be sold as well. So here the concept of social use value comes, that the product not only should be useful for me, but it should be useful for others as well. How? There must be a demand of that product. I have produced a bottle, I need it. There may be possibility that other people do not need a bottle, they do not need this use value, because there may be certain infinite number of reasons that that they do not need it. So the for the purpose of sale, for the purpose of exchange, it is necessary, for the purpose of being a commodity, it is necessary that it is not only useful for me, it is not only required for me objectively as well as subjectively. At the very same time, it is also required and it is also useful and also required by them. For example, we see this social use value concept in our daily lives. For example, in some months car sales go down, in some months car sales goes up. Does it mean that cars are no more use value, no more good use value in those months in which their sales goes down? So there can be two factors. However, there can be multiple factors, but two factors can be discussed. That first of all, they have people have less amount of money with them, and they have invested that money somewhere else. Second, they don't need that car, they don't need that use value in that month. Maybe there can be so many reasons. So let's concentrate here on the use value aspect, the social use value. In order to produce the later, he must not only produce use values, but use values for others, social use values. But in bracket he is stating something different. And now, and not only for others, without more, he's adding another exception to it. This law of social use value, he is adding an exception to it. And not only for others, without more. The medieval peasant produced quit rent corn for his feudal lord and tithe corn for his parson, but neither the quit rent corn nor the tithe rent corn became commodities by reason of the fact that they had been produced for others. So he's giving an example of medieval peasant, and this is the time of feudalism, when uh, feudal lords have uh, serfs, and they serve 24/7 for the feudal lord, and they give all of their labor time to the feudal lord, and they produce these items, quit rent corn and tithe rent corn, but they do not become commodities by the reason of the fact that these has been produced for others. So despite the fact that these corn and rent and this corn is produced for someone, another person, that is the feudal lord, still that they do not become commodities by merely by this reason that it is being produced for someone else. Why it do not become a commodity, despite that we have read in the earlier paragraph that the thing becomes commodity only when it is produced for someone else, for the purpose of someone else, not for self consumption. So here the slave the slave, or the, we can say, call the serf, is producing for someone else and not for his self consumption. But still Karl Marx is saying that it is not a commodity but a use value, a mere use value. Why? He has given this answer in the next line. To become a commodity, a product must be transferred to another whom it will serve as a use value by means of exchange. Exchange is important. In case of feudal lord and the serf, there is no exchange. The feudal lord owns the serf. The feudal lord and the serf are not at equal footing. Only at equal footing exchange can take place. So the feudal kind of society is similar or is a bigger version of the society in which the people produce for self consumption. So it is a kind of society where it's that kind of society. He is comparing self consumption with feudal kind of society, because for example, in a tribal society or in a family mode of production, everybody is producing for their self consumption and not for the purpose of sale, and it becomes thing and not a commodity. Similarly, in case of a feudal kind of society, there is no valid exchange between a feudal lord and the serf, and the serf is nothing but serving as a kind of slave for the feudal. He is bounded, his labor and his human being, his person is bounded by the is bound with the land, and he has no individual existence, while for the purpose of an exchange there should be free will. There has to be free will. So it is a family kind of production. So tribal, slavery, feudal, village communities, all these kind of productions do not produce commodities. They produce use values for self consumption. This is the concept of Karl Marx. And only for the purpose of exchange, if something is produced, not within the family, but not within it, but for outside. Just 1 minute. For example, it is a feudal society, a feudal village. Everything that is produced for within the society, within it, feudal lord, here is the feudal lord, and here are the slaves or serfs, whatever we call them, serfs. The serfs are producing for the feudals. It is an enclosed society, just like a family. They are doing nothing, but they are actually doing self consumption. Suppose this society, suppose a village, an area, or a district, or something, we can call it some territory. Now this whole territory starts producing for selling the produce for someone else, to another territory. It becomes commodity, because the produce is not produced for self consumption. It is produced for the purpose of exchange, and as soon as it is produced for the purpose of exchange by the whole system, then it becomes the commodity. So the use value at a later stage, when it is required to be sold, and obviously the logic behind it is that when their self needs becomes fulfilled, and they have generated enough they have generated enough produce, that their use value becomes a non-use values for them, because of the abundance of production. So they think that now this is to be given to someone else, and in return we can get something else. So this is a particular stage when use values acquire, they become material depositories of exchange value, when the use values become the non-use value for them, for the person who is producing, and they become social use value. They become use values for someone else. Last point, lastly, nothing can have value without being an object of utility. So this the object must have utility. It should carry utility, otherwise it will not contain value. We can create a bucket. If we form a bucket without its base, then the bucket cannot be used to fill the water despite the embodiment of labor, but there is no value in it. Because it is not a product of utility. So this is the utility do not remain. If there is no utility, there is no value. But exchange is not taking place only because of the utility. Exchange is taking place with only on the basis of value. So Karl Marx is trying to explain the concept of value, the concept of exchange, the purpose of exchange, the rationale behind the exchange, and the uh, the logic of exchange, that how exchange takes place. So he compares, he brings this utility and use value aspect, because it is usually thought that it is because of the use value the product is exchanged. No, this is not the basic logic on which the product the commodity is exchanged. It is exchanged only because of its value, and that is the human labor embodied in it. However, without utility, it cannot have value as well. If the thing is useless, so this is a relationship between the use value and value, that they are inseparable. A thing cannot have value without use value. So this is the resolution of the contradiction, in one sense. If the thing is useless, so is the labor contained in it. The bucket example, the labor does not count as labor, therefore creates no value. The labor becomes the superfluous. So here our section 1 ends. So I should stop here, and I request all of you to please go through it properly with the original text, with the book, and please discuss it. And wherever you find that the concepts are not okay, not correct, you should please specify it. uh, Till then I should stop. A number of concepts has been discussed in the section 1. The section 1 is very profound, and it is very it is very complicated. So I tried in this part of video to explain the maximum amount of concepts that are embodied in the text. However, there can be multiple interpretations of the text, and as it is an immense work, a lot of other relations can come out of the text. And this is the beauty of this text, that as much as we read this text, we always find something new out of it. So I request that you please go through the text, go through the video, and make your valuable comments. Still last time I again request that please do subscribe to the channel, and if you like the video, please like it and please share it and make your valuable comments. And if you find that something is missing, then please add into it. Thank you very much. Bye.